Hello, welcome into the Get Invested podcast. We appreciate you being here. I am, as always, your host, Jordan Stone, and I am joined by my partner, both podcast and business, Matthias Wilson. I'm not gonna lie to you, just up front, we're in the thick of it here, and what we're going to talk about is exactly what in the thick of it. But before we get started, though, Matthias, since we have been in the thick of it, hadn't really just chatted recently. What's been up, man? What are you doing? What's going on? How's that puppy?
Well, it's going. She's definitely getting better at nights.
Literally.
Trying to wear her out during the day so she stays asleep longer. I suppose the house wedding is on the decline, but it still requires a lot of proactive running outside and coaxing it to do her business. But starting to get decent sleep. She has to get up like at least once in the middle of the night. She can't hold it that long yet. So I literally just pick her up, carry her out, set her down outside. She pees. Pick her up, carry her back, because I don't want her running around the house. Yeah, especially but not before she pees and when it's all dark. Plus, I'm usually half groggy. Can't tell which way's up at that point. So, but it's going good. She's sweet, good with the boys, really excitable. So that's just going to be. Erin's definitely going to get knocked down. She eats 3 times a day. She's ravenous. She acts like she's never seen food before every time she sees food.
Yeah, she's going to be pictures. Huge. She's going to be huge, yeah. Yeah, I guess Erin's just going to have to learn to cohabitate with a being of a different species who doesn't understand human rules.
The good news is he knows what to say to her. He'll say like Bailey down, and she's trying to rear up on him or something. However, he is the loudest kid imaginable, so he's yelling it, screaming at the top of his lungs, just like to him it's like normal talking, but to the rest of us it's like it's pretty grating, so it's funny. We know what's going on right away.
And I can imagine Erin's propensity for sharing his thoughts and feelings and joy with the world at any given moment probably at said loud volumes probably gets Bailey all riled up as well.
100%. And he likes running. He runs everywhere, as most 3-year-olds do, so she likes to chase. So we're learning.
Yeah. Now, when does she head off to obedience school where down will actually mean something?
I think the 28th. So I think coming up in, I don't know, 4 or 5 days before we go on our vacation, drop her off. She's going to do the immersive obedience school, and then we'll pick her up a little bit after we get back.
Okay. Oh yeah. So she's going to be there the whole time you guys are on the cruise, huh? That's a good plan. Good planning.
Yeah. I mean, we actually, before we even agreed to get her, we kind of checked into it because we already had the cruise booked. So we were like, that'd be pretty rough on a puppy to like, just board her randomly somewhere that quickly.
Like right away.
Like, hey, this is the appropriate age for the obedience school, according to the experts. So it'll end up working out really, really well.
Okay, yeah, that's a nice alignment. The stars, constellations, schedules, Google calendars, whatever you want to say. Nice alignment there. Well, all right. I look forward to meeting her one day. I bet by the time I get down there, she's going to be like 4 times as big as she is right now. But
she's going to be huge.
At that point, Erin will just be like, she won't be following Erin. Erin will just be like holding on to her. I'm sure she's wanting to get bigger because it's a pretty long walk to where the grass is. Are you guys taking her out the back door when she pees? She's like, "Can I pee here?" It's like, "No, this is the screened-in porch." "Can I pee here?" "No, this is the pool area." Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, we just go out the side door. We go out the other side door. So she's not too far.
Yeah.
She hasn't really got to step down from the kitchen down into the back porch though. She kind of halts every time. It's like you do this like literally 50 times a day. I'm confused how you're still not sure there's actually a step there. Whatever.
I mean, it's a tricky distance. It's a little bit deeper than you think. Also, your house is all flat, so it's like the only one she encounters, so she doesn't.
It's true.
This is new.
It's like steps. What is this?
Whoa.
True.
Crazy. All right, well, that's been Puppy Corner. We'll be interested to follow up once she's and been in training, and you can make her do hopefully some super cute things while she's still a pup, and get some pictures of that, some LinkedIn, some Instagram fodder, I'm sure. But
there we go.
We're going to exactly. I mean, you got to do it for the gram. Today we are just going to talk really just kind of. I mean, you can say this is lazy, but also could just be synergy. We're just talking about what's going on in our lives right now because we're in the thick of a due diligence. I don't know, phase. Maybe we can just be like T-Swift and call it an era. I don't know, but we're in the middle of it. So we thought, hey, why not explain all the steps that are in this phase and what it is and why it takes so long? That might help a lot of people understand a big part of the process that kind of happens before any investor really ever hears about a property. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to let Matthias take over here and just kind of outline and take it from there.
Yeah. So basically, there's a lot of, before we ever even make an offer on a property, there's a lot goes on. We've talked about underwriting and how we do that. But basically, what we're going to talk today about what happens after we've made the offer, we've come to terms with the seller, we've got it under contract. Boom. Now we're in what's called the due diligence period. It can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 30 days, 60 days, depending on the property and the agreement that the buyer and the seller come to. We try to have, as a buyer, I like to have as long as possible of a due diligence period so that I could find a problem. And if I don't have the resources, or it would cost too much and ruin the returns on the investment to fix whatever that problem is, then I can back out. But as you can obviously tell, if a seller just gives us unlimited due diligence time, then he's opening himself up to a whole bunch of risk. He's taken his property off the market for the entire time of the due diligence period. But if we back out at the end of it, now he's lost all that time of selling the property. So it's always a push-pull between the buyer and the seller on that, on how long the due diligence period is. But basically, what we're doing during this period is we're doing. I kind of wrote down 5 main things that we're looking at. We're going over the lender. So we're getting the loan started, making sure that the property will qualify for financing. The insurance, making sure that we understand exactly what it's going to cost and what type of insurance we need to carry for this property. We're looking at the property management. We talked last week. We went way deep on property management and how they can even help during the underwriting process. But this is where we get in and we verify that all the rent assumptions that we've made based on what the property has been doing and what we think it can do. We're verifying all of that is correct according to our assumptions. Inspecting the property itself, finding, hey, these roofs are bad, or there's a sinkhole on the property, or whatever. You hire professional inspectors to walk through, tap on all the walls, crawl around in the crawl space, all that kind of stuff. And then legal. It's not really tied to the due diligence, but it's what's happening during the due diligence period, because what we're doing is we're getting the SEC attorneys off and running, building all the paperwork that we're eventually going to send out to the investors, assuming that it passes the due diligence period. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of coordination. It's where a project manager type background really comes in handy, which is basically what I did in the Air Force the last 5 to 6 years of my career. So pretty cool. I enjoy it, but it's definitely challenging.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking that there's a clear analogy here, or I don't even know if it's an analogy. It might just be a parallel that's kind of the same, where people have bought a house before. So they know that some of these steps are kind of involved in buying a house. It's just not close to the same level of involvement, and insurance is just going to be insurance for the most part. You're just going to have home insurance, and that's going to be
sure
built in with your mortgage, so that kind of stuff is, the inspection is the same thing. I think one of the things that was so fun, that was interesting to me the first time when we bought a house, is that, and this is the same thing for what you're talking about, is it's just funny. Everything else in the world, for the most, I guess for the most part, is when you say, I'm going to buy this, you actually buy it right then, right? You're like, here is money or a card or something. I will take this with me, right? Or, in some form or fashion. Even a car, you can walk on, you put some money in, you take the car. But when it comes to stuff like this, even just buying a house, you can just be like, I'm going to buy it. And then you have so many chances to just back out. Everyone has a chance to back out. And I guess that, it makes sense. It's a big purchase and it's a big deal. So yeah, but it's just funny to me. You can at any point.
I will buy this, but there may be some backseas. Let me check.
Yes. Where exactly? I'm pretty sure in this contract there are take backsies. Pretty sure within a certain amount of time, take backsies are allowed. 100%. Because like you said, you're walking around, especially when it's a huge property. You're walking around. If you find something massive, you're like, oh, I don't. It's an interesting moment where caveat emptorum does not apply. The buyer does not need to be aware, because they're going to just go through the whole thing. Now, before we move any further, I do have to ask you one question. You said looking for sinkholes, which is something definitely that can happen in Florida and probably the coast of Mississippi as well, or coast in general. But like, who's liable if you get swallowed up by a sinkhole? I mean, that feels like an act of God. Like, like,
There
is there
is,
sinkhole
believe it or not, in the
coverage?
coast. Well, it depends. And if you're in Princess Bride, the movie, then you just grab a vine and you should be good.
Yeah, yeah, you're fine.
But
Yeah, just
there is
don't go into
actually
the forest.
sinkhole coverage. There's sinkhole coverage in Florida and on places where it's relatively common. It's still super uncommon, but there is actually sinkhole. There's endorsements for sinkholes in a lot of insurance that you get around here. I've never carried it because it's like carrying terrorism coverage. That's like, man,
Right.
at some point, God just wants you to go. I'm not going to pay extra
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
for in case the
I
Taliban
really would
shows
have
up.
liked to have been in the room when like the first set of lawyers tried to like write the first language for like sinkhole coverage and like defining what a sinkhole is and is not. I mean, it's a pretty slippery subject. It's a moving target, if you will. So, but hopefully we're not going to see any sinkholes on the current property that we're looking at. But now, I mean, I think
Yes, that would be terrible.
one of the things you might want to go over a little bit more in depth is like the kind of structure of the 60-30 days or whatever. Like, what is at stake? Why is it that way? What you have to do, what the lender has to do. There is actually some stakes. So maybe go through that, even though there is take
Yeah.
backsies.
So basically, the when you get under contract, typically the agreement is anybody that's bought a house knows you put some earnest money in to prove that you are indeed interested in this property and to kind of set into escrow aside. A third party holds on to it, proving that you're interested and that you have some cash. You're not just making this up and randomly showing up signing contracts. So typically what you'll do is you'll set some earnest money aside immediately going after signing the contract at the start of the due diligence period. You put the money in. Now that money can be pulled back just like a normal house. You can pull back if you walk during the due diligence period for any reason. If you decide not to buy the property, everything comes back. But at the end of the due diligence period, all that money goes hard. And oftentimes in commercial contracts, you add more money that becomes hard, meaning you don't get it back if you walk at the end of the due diligence period. So it's relatively high stakes. And you don't want to mess around while you're during that period. You want to make sure you find every possible issue that you could have that would keep you from closing, because otherwise you're out. It could be a significant. I mean, often it's 1 to 2% of the purchase price of the property, which the bigger the property is, that's a lot of money. So that's at risk when you're doing this. You also have, you have all your inspection fees that you're paying. That's all paid by the buyer, right? The seller isn't going to pay for any of that stuff. So all your any surveys, any lender fees, any appraisal fees, and then obviously the lawyer fees, which is not necessarily tied to the property, but all these fees are paid during this process. So there's more and more money becoming at risk. So you try to strike a balance between getting all those things started so that you have a lot of time to deal before closing to kind of finalize every item. But then you also, hey, if you haven't seen the property at all or haven't been through any of the units at all, maybe you don't start spending that extra money until you kind of see, hey, this is generally what I thought it was going to be. Okay, now I'll pay the attorneys, I'll pay the appraisal and all that stuff. Getting all that stuff ordered up front is good and fast, and getting it done during the period when you want it to be. But you also run the risk of, hey, I found something, but I've also triggered all these other 18 things that I've paid for. So if I walk, now I'm out those funds that I've spent.
Yeah, I mean, you get back the earnest money, but you don't get back what you paid people to do their job.
Yeah, exactly.
I just like the
Yeah.
term.
And
I just go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. I mean, mine was a joke. I just like the term "hard money." That the money goes hard. Just makes me think of like a dollar, like $100 bill, walking around with like a teardrop tattoo, like he's just done a stint in the pen, and he's just like walking around
Nice.
tough. That's that hard money over there. Yeah, of course. That's what I see in my head. Yeah, he's done some time. Yeah, he knows what it's like on the inside. Yeah. Anyways, I just like that term. So
I don't remember what I was going to say. So continue.
Well, you were just talking about all the like. Sure, you can get back the earnest money, but you have to, if you pull out, you're definitely going to have spent money on people looking over things and drawing up contracts and et cetera, that just goes to,
I
it's
do
not like you
remember
can
now.
like, you know, control. Can you just like take a document and just like control H, just, find a replace, and then therefore like what were you going to say?
You actually you can't. Well, I was going to say that oftentimes that's that hard money, whatever you've spent, is like you have to think of it as a sunk cost. It's a kind of a business term because the problem is that you don't want to get married to a property if you do find something that would potentially impact the returns that you're going to promise to investors. You have to be able to walk away, even if you have spent tens,
Mm,
hundreds of thousands of dollars, or locked up that amount of money. It's it's a risky business, and the longer you do it, the more, well, one, eventually you'll probably lose some money the more deals you do, but also you get better at detecting where the real risk is when you're getting a property under contract. So you're better at detecting when there might be, when I should slow roll paying for everything and when I should just go all in. You know what I mean? But there's
yeah.
always the risk that you'll find something that just completely out of the blue that gets you, and you have to be able to walk away.
Yeah, that I think sunk cost has got to be one of like the just toughest concepts for humans to handle, not as an actual idea, but just like as a human being actually doing it. Like,
Hmm.
because
Yeah,
it's just, you
I
got
mean
to just
that's
say,
why
well,
gambling's
the
addictive,
end.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah.
like,
What's the
I've lost
phrase?
14 hands in a row. The next one's going to be good because I've paid so much for it. I got to see this good hand.
Yeah.
It's not how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I've always loved the phrase throwing good money after bad. I read that in The Rise of Silas Lapham way back in the day. It's one of my favorite books of all time, but I was like, it's just an interesting phrase, but it's so very true. Like you can't save the bad money by putting good money on top of it.
It's
It
gone.
doesn't, the bad,
Yep.
it only goes one way. The bad changes the good to bad, not the good changing the bad to good. Like that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's true.
that is something that it takes, I guess, both practice and a certain type of person. I hadn't really thought about that much. Who's just like, okay, I got to make the smart call here. That smart call is losing $50,000. So that's going to be
Yeah.
tough.
Exactly.
Let's not do that. How about we just don't do that?
No, I don't want to. I'm not going to
Yeah.
do it on
Okay.
purpose. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So reassuring that you're not going to do it on purpose. Let's Speaking of people who have to make risk assessments, let's talk about the lenders and that process, because I know I mean, again, the whole point of this is that I'm learning, and I know in the conversation that we have had, like it's been very interesting to me, actually, and I'm not just saying that, to learn that whole negotiating process, because it's an assessing a risk. It's the beauty of the modern economy, right? The fact that we have built structures to be able to like take gambles on people to do something beyond the means that are immediately available. And that's why they call it a financial instrument. It's a very apt term. By the way, before you explain lenders, I saw the name of one of the big people at the bank that we've been dealing with, and it was like Emery something. I was like, that man has like the most perfect banker name of all time. It was incredible. It was incredible. He
Nice.
was a third, I think, too. I'm not going to say his whole name, but it was like Emery something the third, and I was like, oh my god, he was like born in a bank, and then he just like
Like
it was
like
incredible.
Thurston
Anyways,
Howell.
exactly. Yeah, so let's talk about this lending.
Guy was born to be a millionaire. Okay, yeah. So
Exactly.
for the lenders underwrite several different things. They're going to underwrite the property. They're going to underwrite the market, just like we do, really. The property, the market, the operator, me, and the property manager, which is whoever the third party or in-house management, whoever it is. They're going to underwrite all those people. When you get into commercial deals, they don't much care about your. So it's called non-recourse debt, meaning they're not going to come after whoever signs in a loan. They're not going to come after your. If Let me back up here. So when you sign on a loan to buy a house, it's recourse, meaning they will come after whatever you own to get what get what they're owed, including the house or more if there is more. Same with commercial properties. If it's recourse debt on smaller commercial properties, often it is recourse debt. But if it's non-recourse debt, they're not coming after you. All they're doing is taking the property back or changing operators or whatever it is. So, which is nice because it means that, if I'm, financing a $5 million loan for a big property, it's nice that if something goes wrong, they're not coming after me personally. They're just going to take the property back. That being said, they really underwrite the property because it pays for itself, right? The property needs to be able to pay for the loan and then some, in order for them to ever cut the check for the purchase. So they're going to underwrite me. They're going to look at my track record, and some of the bigger debt agencies, the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. It's pretty hard to bust in if you haven't done any large multifamily deals before. So they have a lot of bureaucracy and some weird regulations, and they ask a lot of goofy questions, and you just got to do all these checklists, fill out all this info. But if you kind of, once you get your foot in the door, once you get one under your belt, it's a lot easier. They consider you already underwritten. You're good. They say, look, you update your personal financial statement, update your, your real estate owned, your kind of what you've got, your assets, send us that, and you're probably good to go. So having done a Fannie Mae in our Hattiesburg deal, it makes everything easy when we're underwriting Fannie Mae loans going forward, which is nice. But they're going to underwrite the operator. They're going to underwrite the market, and they do that by having tiers of markets. And the bigger the market, the better the terms on the loan they're going to offer you, because basically they're protecting against lack of demand for your asset. So if it's in New York City, we know that everybody needs to live in a place in New York City. We know there's huge demand. There's gazillions of people. If it's in I don't know, Timbuktu, then a little bit they're going to be a lot more strict on how they lend and not give you quite as much money. They're going to make you put more down, etc., give you a higher rate to protect themselves because there's just, it's less demand. So they give you these tiers. They're underwriting the market that way. They basically have a big buckets of every town in the USA, and they all fall into one of these tiers that they have. The big lenders. That's kind of how they do it. So that's how they underwrite the market. That's kind of already done. So they just plug and play, like, oh, this market qualifies for this tier. And sometimes they may be more restricted and be like, hey, I know it's kind of showing borderline this tier, but we're only going to offer you this tier to protect us. And that's kind of going on a lot right now too, as with interest rates being all in question, people aren't understanding, or people aren't willing to risk as much in smaller markets. So they're doing that, and then they underwrite they underwrite me, they underwrite the market, and then the property itself. So they're going to go in and look at all the leases. They do their own market analysis. Hey, our systems show us that a market should operate, with this kind of expenses. They're operating, they take into account how the property has been operating, balanced with what they think the market should be. They have their own underwriters that do exactly what I do. And then they verify the property. So they'll go out and walk the property with some inspectors themselves, look at certain units. They typically don't do as in depth as we do when we do our inspections on a property, but they will definitely get into some of the stuff and look around, poke around to make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into. And then finally, they'll underwrite the property manager as well. They'll go, hey, how many units does this property manager have? Do they know what they're talking about? Do they, have they managed this type of loan before? If they are they approved by Fannie Mae as a vendor? That's kind of what they go through as a lender looking at a property when we're in this due diligence period.
I'm just trying to. There's a lot going on there, but yeah, I think. I mean, I think one of the things that was interesting to me is kind of how the ways in which you can show good faith. Like you said, of course, there's your stuff, and like if you've done one before, and track record, and it can be backed by either your own finances or you have partners, or also as we have a lot of times part of closing a loan is the amount that we've raised. I think that's the one thing maybe that you didn't really get into there, about how like this part actually interacts with our raising money, our talking to investors. So that, maybe that's the last piece that kind of takes us to, because I mean, a lot of these things are happening concurrently. There's a few things that happen early, but a lot of them are just like kind of at the same time. But it gets a little sticky. So yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about how the end of this process really does bring the investor into it.
Yeah. So on that note, when we get a property under contract, well, when we make an offer on a property, the broker that takes your offer to the whether he's the listing agent on it or if he just has a potential off market seller, when he takes our offer, he's gonna give his opinion to the seller of us as a group, and that's where as the buyer having a track record really helps, because if he can say, hey man, this guy's closed, he's raised X amount of money before, brought, his group is capable of taking down this property. He just, I mean, we this broker literally said, hey, this guy and his partners took down a $40 million property in Savannah just a couple of months ago. They can take care of yours, and that carries a lot of weight with a seller, because he goes, okay, I'm not dealing with a guy who's starting off, who this guy clearly knows what he's doing. And that the same goes for the lender. The lender goes, okay, I've seen you close before, I've seen you raise the funds, we're confident that, if you don't have the liquidity, which honestly, if I had the liquidity required to take down some of the properties I go after, I might just do it myself. But that's never the case. So what you do is, I'll show my balance sheet. Here's the cash on hand. Here's what I have in investments. Here's what I own in real estate. And they'll go, obviously, this is not enough to take down whatever property you're going after. So clearly, you're going to be bringing on investors. They understand that. But if you have that track record, that's where they have the faith that, hey, if this guy says he can do it, he can do it because he's done it before. Is that what you kind of meant? We're getting after?
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, they see that you can close and you can raise a certain amount, because they're going to need, in order for them to loan, because our situation, I'm not going to speak for all different situations, but when we're taking down a property, it's going to be partially loan, partially liquidity raised from investors, partially cash. Mm-hmm. So, there's always kind of a target to get one of those to kick the other one into gear. And, it's kind of, like I say, it's interesting because you're actually raising money for something that you have actually yet to even buy, technically.
Yeah, it's a lot of concurrent stuff, which is why the talking about the attorneys, what they do. That's why we have such extensive paperwork, is because it protects both us as the operator and the investor with the legalities of what we are allowed to do with investor funds prior to closing, which is nothing. We are allowed to collect them and keep them in a company established account, but we're not allowed to touch them until closing. And if we don't close for whatever reason, after we've collected funds from investors, then they go right on back without ever being touched. And that protects the investors from us going, hey, there's some this lawyer fees or this inspection fee is pretty expensive. Thank you for your investment. And that's not how it works. It all has to come from our coffers until it closes. We can be reimbursed after closing, but all the risk is taken by us up till closing day, which is I prefer it that way. I couldn't do that. I would, if it wasn't legally that way, then I wouldn't be able to do it anyway, but that's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, that's good to know, for the investors to know that their money is just kind of sitting there until it can actually be used for its purpose. It'd be funny if you're like, oh, thanks for this investment, I'm going to pay this. Guys, we just really didn't hit our return. I'm really sorry. We tried. That's like my accountant on FC24. He just tells me that sorry, you lost $100,000.
Sorry,
Nick, what happened? Oh, I don't know. You just did. You just did. So speaking of concurrent things, well, there's some things that are concurrent, but there's others that are, I mean, well before closing, we're going to be having those inspections coming through and securing our insurance quotes, at least, because you got to make those decisions early on and that's during the backseat part. So maybe talk about how they kind of go, how they work together, the inspections and the insurance. I mean, does it in any way depend upon the inspection, or is that just completely separate?
No, I mean, it will, because they care about the condition of the roofs, the condition of the structures. A lot of times when you get a quote from an insurance agency, what they'll do is they'll send you a quote based on an assumption, kind of like when we send an offer in. They'll send you a quote based on the assumption of the condition of the property, and then they'll send you the quote. You'll go, okay, cool, I sign up. As you sign up, there's like a 30-day period where they'll send inspectors out too, kind of just completely on their own, to go verify what they thought about this property. They may come back and say, hey, if you don't fix this and that, this rate is no longer valid. based on our inspections. They'll send you all kinds of crazy checklists that
Mm.
hey, what's the age of the HVACs? What's the age of the blah, 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 every little thing on the property. And, it's very painstaking. You'll go, a lot of times we'll send inspection reports or stuff from the property inspection report to the insurance company as a way to answer all those questions. So basically, they do run concurrently, because it's good to think of a quote as a assumptions based quote, meaning if everything you say and we think is true, here's
Mm.
what it'll cost to insure this property. And then just like, they have their own due diligence period where they're verifying everything that they assume, and we're helping them out as much as we can. So the inspection themselves, we're doing a lot of that. We use the inspection as a way to, one, verify what we thought about the property, but two, also confirm our plans for after we take over the property. So we're going in every unit, we're knocking on walls, we're looking in attics, garages, closets, everything, looking at all the appliances, all that stuff, and we're taking very careful records of every item in every unit, because that'll help us build a really perfect budget. Say perfect, but a really as perfected as we can make it budget on what we want to do after closing in order to renovate the units or fix the roofs or whatever it is that we got to do for that particular property. So it's kind of a twofold. It's leading our business plan, but it's also verifying that there's no major problems, and that our assumptions are correct on the property. Well, when we say, okay, the units are this size and this shape when we buy a property. So it's crazy how like everything all kind of works all in the same, because we take the property management on the inspection tour as well. So I have a member from this inspection we just did. We had a property manager and the inspector went side by side in every unit holding clipboards, each looking at, really they're looking at very similar things and talking to each other. Hey, I saw this upstairs, I saw this outside, I saw this in this closet. Moving on, the kitchen was regular appliances or white appliances, it wasn't stainless, so on and so forth. They're all it's all kind of hand in hand, because the property manager is going to be the one executing most of the after closing business plan. So having them tied in as soon as possible to the actual state of the property really helps.
Right. And I mean, I just remember that was the other reason that we thought this would be a great time to talk about this, because we just did spend 2 separate podcasts talking about property management, and our good friend Heather, whom
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to speak it into existence. She's going to be on the pod soon. I don't know if there's any commitment, soft or hard or otherwise, but I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to LeVar Ball this and just say it out there and make it happen. So Heather, come on the pod. But yeah, so I mean,
Nice.
I had a lot of fun thinking about that. Just that idea of, everybody's got I wonder if they do that like at their friend's place. Like they walk into their friend's like new house or apartment and they're just all of a sudden like, I don't know. I don't know. Like,
I
just
don't know
like
that they
keep
can
it
turn it off.
down. Don't.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Yeah, their spouse is always like,
Don't
don't
ever
do
invite
it.
a
Don't you
property
do it.
manager over to your house.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just
Now,
hours of
I
judgment
did
as
have
long
that.
as
I
they're
did
there.
want to ask though. I don't. Yeah, they just leave you with a checklist as they walk out the door after the party. You should really look into these things. I don't know if you said this. I don't think so. But is there any back and forth? So say, like you go, and this is completely hypothetical. You're looking at a property, and like they have like really bad HVAC. And then the insurance sees that it has like really bad HVAC, which could lead to all kinds of different issues depending on what goes wrong. And they take that into the quote. But if you go to the insurance and say, whoa, we're going to replace all the HVAC, do they take that into account, or does it not matter until you actually physically have replaced it? How does that work? Because the property is changing
That's
as
a
you
good question,
renovate. How does
because
the
that goes into it a
insurance
lot. We
stay with
say,
that change?
yeah, so we have that conversation. We go, hey, the roofs right now are 20 years old. So, but if we replace, give us a quote based on that, because we can't obviously change the roofs overnight if we buy a property. But we say, hey, the premium right now is really high. That's probably going to not make this very good investment. But we can go to all during due diligence period, go to the investment company and go, hey, if we replace the roofs, rerun these numbers with new roofs, does that change the premium significantly? How does that fit our numbers much better? And if that's the case, maybe we just change our calculations and say, hey, we got to replace the roofs right away. otherwise our insurance is unaffordable, that kind of thing. So absolutely, you would say whatever. I
Mm,
mean, it's HVAC is probably a bad example, but there are things that about the property, like, hey, is there if there's
way to call me out.
sidewalks? Sorry, I'm just being honest. If the sidewalks are really cracked and trip hazards or something, then the liability insurance could be
Yeah.
higher, or they could be like, we're not insuring this. And we go, okay, what is it if we repair it, or whatever. So that is definitely part of the conversation, and it's also important to know. I suppose, like, we've kind of mostly hit on everything, but one of the things that is more art than science in this business is the back and forth between the seller during the due diligence period. So I've had it in the past where somebody wanted to buy one of my properties. They got us under contract. They did their inspections, and then they came to us and said, hey, you told us that this HVAC was relatively new, but it's actually 6 years old, not 4 years old. We're going to need, to come down 4,000 from that. We found two units that had bad, a bad paint job that wasn't up to what we wanted, even though it had tenants in it, which don't get me started. But basically, they came in, like, they presented us a list of items that they found during the inspection, like nickel and diming us all the way through. And it was a very bad experience, and they did not end up buying the property, as you might guess. So that would be an example of what not to do. But there are plenty of examples when something fundamentally has changed. If there is, we'll go back to the sinkholes. If there's a sinkhole on the property that you discovered during due diligence, and there's something you can do to repair it, then you potentially would go to the seller and go, look, this is not something that we assumed was going to be an issue when we came to agreement on this property. You say, hey, can you come off the price half of this so that we split the difference, or we may have to walk, or whatever. There's a whole bunch of back and forth, and that's where the art comes in, because if it's a good enough deal, it'll support any deal that's good enough, that we go after. Will support finding some problems that we didn't expect. You pretty much expect to find problems that you don't know about, but they don't cover huge issues with the property. So there is an art to when you push back on the seller and say, hey man, this is not what we thought the property was, and can we come to a new agreement? It's called retrading, but you have to strike a balance. And he may or may not agree to that. You may end up having to walk, but you also want to strike a balance, because you don't want to be known as the guy who comes in with a checklist and nickel and diamond for, hey, I need $2,000 here, I need 14 grand here, I need, whatever it is. Nobody's going to do business with that guy ever again, because the broker is watching this entire transaction, this conversation between the buyer and seller, and he goes, look, you don't want to deal with that guy. That guy is going to lock you up, and then he's going to come back with a checklist of stuff that is normal wear and tear on a property, and he's gonna try to retrade you. And those people don't get deals. They don't get sent the good deals, from the brokers, because they don't want to, because the broker's reputation is at stake too, right? He's like, hey, I brought this buyer to a potential seller. Seller goes, okay, I trust you. And then the broker vouches for the buyer, and then you were to pull something like that, and you've ruined the deal, and then you've ruined your relationship with that broker too. So you don't want you got to guard against all these things, and that's really why I call it an art and not so much a science.
Yeah. Do you know that? Well, that also just makes me just my brain. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that explains to, like, just very specifically why a broker is called a broker, right? Like, they're really brokering, mediating, they're really making sure that, both parties are acting the right way, and that their kind of thing is to bring people together. And so they're not going to bring somebody who's not going to play nice, for lack of a better term. It's funny you brought up sinkholes though,
Mm-hmm.
because I was legit about to ask you, like, so what's the, like, bargain or the price reduction or the, like, percentage sale for a sinkhole? Like, well, we found a sinkhole, so that's an automatic 25% off.
I've never seen a sinkhole, so I don't know. I just used that because we were talking about it earlier, and it would fundamentally change my thoughts on a property if I was,
Yeah, I
like,
know.
walking
It'd
through
be
and,
so funny.
there's a pit to hell 2 feet off the
There's a
sidewalk
sinkhole
over here next to Unit 3.
Yeah, and then you round a corner and you see an ROUS, you got to get out of there. So
Yeah, yes,
there's
true.
no sticking around.
I don't believe they exist.
That's only because you've never seen one. Yeah, it is. I mean, we actually just. I mean, we don't go into details here, but we actually did just have that scenario happen. Not a sinkhole, guys. Not a sinkhole, but something that we weren't expecting did arise, and it is exactly that kind of situation. You just got to work through it
Yeah,
if it's worth it.
potentially.
And I guess the seller
Yeah,
has, yeah, they're in a little bit more advantageous position to help you out, but they don't have money in the game yet. They are locked up paying for something that they want to sell, but you are the buyer. A lot of times should be more motivated, right, to work it out since they're the ones that have already put up funds.
theoretically, yeah, but I mean, it
Yeah,
really depends. I mean, if how motivated the seller is. Sometimes sellers really just want to move on, and it's like, hey, if I'm going to get, you know, if I'm going to get a check for X, but then subtract a little bit of Y off the top of that, really not that big of a hit to me. Maybe, maybe it is. Maybe they're like, hey, I can hold on to this and get top dollar. I'm not interested in dealing. This is my price, and that's completely their prerogative. So it all depends on how good the deal is
sure.
and how much space you have when we're buying, how much space you have in the numbers. Is it, hey, are we going to go from amazing returns to good returns, or are we going to go from good returns to questionable returns? That's the questions you got to answer during
Right,
that due diligence period, and
right.
either say, hey, we're good to press, or nope, we got to walk.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me. I never had thought this all the way through, which again, this is why we're doing this. But your CapEx budget actually that expenditure is actually mitigating costs on another part of the balance sheet. So it's not even necessarily just an expenditure, right? If you're like, oh, well, these renovations are actually going to bring this recurring cost down. So, not in just insurance, but also renovate. I mean, everybody understands if you renovate and make it more like airtight, it'll bring, wear and tear down or like air down and stuff. But no, it'll actually bring like insurance down and, stuff like that. So that's interesting. I mean, it's all connected, but I never really thought about it when we're looking at these, when we're building these budgets, that was, those are kind of like in flux with each other. Inverse relationship almost in a way, because the more you
Yeah,
spend on
and then you
renovations,
also think about,
theoretically, the more insurance.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like maintenance costs too. So, like, let's say we put in real nice granite countertops. It's pretty hard to mess up. Even renters struggle to mess up granite countertops. Knock on wood. But let's say you're putting those
Mm-hmm.
in. Now you have,
Yeah, I mean,
instead of
and that
old
Formica
Formica,
is just so easy to mess up.
the
Yeah.
wear and tear is a lot less. Exactly. So now you've lowered your maintenance costs over the long term, and as well as being able to demand higher rent for a much nicer looking kitchen. Now that's the whole point of the cost benefit analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, does that translate for like LPV versus carpet? I mean, I would assume it's easier to clean LPV, but I don't know. In a carpet definitely wears out faster, I feel like.
Yeah,
So
like 100%. Yeah, you put LVP, it's LVP, luxury vinyl plank. But basically, yeah, basically it does because it's much more durable. You can pour water all over it and clean it up. Just have puppy dogs urinating all over it, and it's not doesn't cause any permanent damage or smell or anything. It doesn't hold smell. So yeah, absolutely. It looks nicer. People enjoy it more, but it's also really durable, way more durable than carpet. So that's another perfect example. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to correct you, but actually I was talking about LPVP. That's luxury premium vinyl plank. Sorry, it's just the next
Okay.
step up.
Sure. Sure.
All right. Well, on that really highbrow moment, we probably should wrap it up here. On a win. We appreciate you hanging out and listening to us. If you got any questions about anything that we went through, please feel free to comment, slide into the DMs on LinkedIn or on Substack. You can comment at the bottom of this posting on Substack. You can also just shoot us an email or any other way you want to communicate with us. Also, please like and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. As always, I'm Jordan. Thanks again for listening to Get Invested.
Cheers.
We'll talk to you guys next week. put me on a